We're talking about it. Mom's making it. We're talking about substance abuse recovery. We're talking about senior living, healthcare. We have a great show. I'm Angie Graham, and we're talking about it. We are talking about it. I'm Angie Graham in studio today with Tom Farley.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome. Tom grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, and graduated from Georgetown University with a marketing degree. He began his career as a marketing and communications professional in the banking and finance industry, living in New York City area. And from 1999 to 2012, he ran the Chris Farley Foundation, a nationally recognized nonprofit dedicated to substance abuse prevention. Like his brother Tom was successful in opening the eyes and ears of youth audience through the powerful and effective use of humor. In 2008, he wrote the Chris Farley Show, a New York Times best-selling biography of his late brother, the actor and comedian Chris Farley. He has been interviewed on The Today Show, Good Morning America, Larry King Live, Fox News, and The View, and he has been featured in People Magazine, USA Today, and several national recognized newspapers and publications. Tom is the Community Outreach Director for Recovery.com, which is a website that gives digital resources for substance use recovery as well as mental health. He is also a motivational speaker, delivering messages about substance abuse and prevention and recovery, and Tom lives in Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow, that sounds impressive. Well, that's quite a guy. Okay, that's me, I guess. Yeah.
And Tom is going to be joining us for a couple episodes. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you. We met last summer at a recovery event.
Yeah.
And we have that passion in common.
Totally. Yeah, that was it wasn't the brats. I really enjoyed the conversation we had.
So we were doing a thing here at our house, Senior Living, and we were talking about families about their legacies.
Yeah.
And I thought of you right away. When I hear the name Farley, I think what a legacy the name has. And who is Tom Farley?
Wow. I'm just finding that out. That's the beauty of recovery. The Tom Farley, I guess, is really somebody that really wants to connect and wants to be a part of an ensemble, a group, and just really I don't know. I think it's not a Farley thing. I really think it's a Wisconsin thing. I don't think the Farleys could be anything that we are if we didn't have those roots here. And I've got cousins, several, all over, in every state, everywhere. But it all started here, and I think they carried a little bit Wisconsin. It's just who we are. We've taken kind of that DNA and really shown the rest of the world kind of what that is. I always loved that about just Chris, that he never forgot that he was just Chris from Wisconsin, and we still love him and talk about him today. And it's like, and here in Wisconsin, we're like, well, that's us.
What was it like growing up did you grow up in Madison?
In Madison, yeah.
And how many kids are there? Are you the oldest?
Yeah, pretty much. We have an older sister, Barb, I think is her name. No, that's why I say that. That's why I say it every time. Barb's the only sister, and then there were four boys, and I was the oldest of the boys. It was me, then Chris, and then Kevin and Johnny brought up the rear, and Chris, Kevin and John all went to Second City in Chicago, learned comedy, became professional comedians, and I studied.
Okay.
I was the.
What was it like living in the Farley home when you were growing up?
It was chaos, but it was fun, and again, you think, oh well, Chris Farley, was kind of the leader of it all. Like, no, we were all, we just fed off each other. We just loved kind of who we are. Like, all right, it's funny. I came up with this analogy. I've called it a circus for years, and it dawned on me that how true that really was. It was a circus, in the sense that, like, so you've had, Chris was the elephant. Everyone came to see Chris. Were amazed at, like, oh, he's up on his hind feet. He's bouncing on a ball. That was Chris, and my two other brothers, Kevin and Johnny, they were the clowns that would come in, in the little car with a big, throwing pies in each other's face. Everyone was the clowns. My sister she'd come out in a sequins, wave to the crowd, smile, everyone loved her, and then we'd saw her in half. And the next night she'd come out, wave to the crowd, beautiful, saw her in half. So, like, we would always be sawing her in half. And my dad would be out front, like, the barker, like, he loved that he created this. He's like, you've got to see this craziness that I created. And then I was, as the older brother, with all the expectations, I was the guy. I was the ringmaster in the center ring, in the red tuxedo, thinking that it was all about me, and it was absolutely nothing to do with me. But I did, for the longest time, couldn't believe that it wasn't not about me. I'm the oldest son, and that's kind of what it was. And of course, lastly, you have my mom, who was up on the trapeze, just everyone, get the oohs and ahs, and she'd wave down, and she'd look down on the crowd and, like, I'm not going down there. And she was not no part of that. She remained up there, safe distance away from the rest of us, and that was the Farley Circus. Yeah, it was crazy.
So what was it like? Did you guys have normal dinners come together at the dinner table and have dinners?
It was
Is that
all
part of your
about
culture?
dinners. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how we, we would get around the dinner table, and Dad would sit at the head, and we loved our father. He would take. We would sit. We would take everything was evolved around him. And every night he would sit down and he would go, okay, news. And he'd point to all of us, and we'd have to say what our day was like. And telling Dad was like I did this, Dad, and just looking for that, that affirmation. And Dad was like, that's great. And the next person. He was interested in all of our days. But we all, like, kind of went around the room.
So you had a great family culture.
Yeah. Food obviously was very important to it. But food, around a table together, yeah. We always had seconds, that's for sure.
As we like to eat in Wisconsin.
We do.
There's no doubt about that.
And of course, my mom was just the worst cook. She's 1950s. I mean, I look at a casserole now and I just start crying. I'm like, no more, please. I remember, my ex-wife now said once when we were, I said, because you have the worst diet. And I'm like, I had fruit every night. My mom served us fruit every night, and she's like, are you talking like Del Monte, like fruit cups? Like, yeah. Like, that's not fruit. That's all sugar. Like, really? I didn't know. So, yeah.
We're Talking About It is brought to you by Our House Senior Living. Visit us at ourhouseseniorliving.com.
So the family went to Edgewater to school, didn't you?
Edgewood. Yes. So because it was a Catholic thing, we were Catholic, and that was more of a. So we went to parochial schools, and then on into Edgewood High School. With the nuns, all that, the whole thing. That's why I like to say when I moved back with my family, they grew up a little bit up into middle school. We lived in in the New York area, in Connecticut. And when I moved back here, I'm like, all going to Madison West. Like, I'm not going to give you that pain. No nuns. So, but yeah, for generations, actually, my father's siblings all went there. Yeah.
So you have kids.
Yeah.
Tell us about your kids.
So two older daughters and a younger son. They're all in their 30s, early 30s. So the two girls live out in Brooklyn or New York. One lives in Manhattan now, and one in Brooklyn. And they ran back to New York, where they were raised. And my son, he went the other direction to L.A. because he went through Second City in Chicago, and that's it. He wanted to follow not his dad. He wanted to follow his uncles into a career in entertainment. So I love New York. I love visiting my girls. My son, he's got to come to me. I don't do L.A. No thanks. But it's fun, and I told them all, like, you do what I did, move out, go to New York or L.A., move out there, live somewhere else, but you'll always come back to Madison. I tell you that right now. I've left Madison like probably 3 times in my life, saying I'll never come back here. And I
Something
always do.
About home.
This is like such a comfort. I'm glad I've lived other places, but man, if this wasn't here, I don't know where I'd be.
How did your family dynamic change with Chris's passing? With all your siblings?
Interesting. Well, I can, for me, and I talk about this a lot, like, for some reason, I knew right away that if I was going to deal with this loss and this grief, I had to talk about it. And I started doing that. I started going into schools and just talking about it. And I think that made for a lot of reasons, the rest of my family kind of uncomfortable, because we didn't want to, first of all, we're Irish, so we buried those emotions. But I just knew I needed to talk about it. And to this day, I still see a lot of my family that haven't really gone down that road as far as I have, and I still see the pain, because they haven't done that. And so, it's been healing for me. I was hoping that they would see that and want to do that as well, but I can only, I just know for me it's been very healing to be able to go out and talk about Chris, and in the process, which was really interesting. I started out talking about somebody else's story, somebody else's addiction, thinking I would help people with Chris's story. But I realized that it wasn't my story. And once I got into recovery and started, and this is not that long ago, and started telling my story, I was amazed at the people that I attracted because of it. And I'm like, you don't want to hear about Chris? And they're like, well, yeah, if you want to talk about it, it's interesting, but you're here, you're in recovery. I want to hear your story. And that blew me away. I carried Chris with me. I continue his recovery. Sometimes I talk about that, but it's really now me. And I went from, growing up with this expectation of who I was supposed to be, and trying very hard to be that person. Mm-hmm. Then I became somebody's brother, mm-hmm. on top of that person that I was trying to be. And where was that authentic person? I'm just now trying to find that person, who that is. For the longest time, I used to joke, my full name was Tom Farley, brother of Chris Farley, who died of a drug overdose. That was my full name. Now I just get to be Tom Farley again. And mm-hmm. I talk about those things, but wow.
And now the work is your work.
And now I'm healing. I'm healing,
mm-hmm.
And I'm showing my authentic self. And that takes a lot of honesty, a lot of vulnerability. I should stop reading Brené Brown, but it has helped. She made me go there, but it was worth it. It was worth it, and it's worth continuing down that road too. So I didn't expect that.
And so the legacy, the family legacy for you is finding your truth and finding your own healing.
Well, yeah. And I'll go back to, Chris, what was great, where I'm now is with all the work I've done and all, talking about Chris, is like, I was carrying an awful lot around, when you have somebody in your family that's that much more, acute and addicted or whatever, you carry around a lot of baggage. Like I didn't realize, as much as I loved my brother, how much, resentment I had. Like, as anyone that knows that has somebody with addiction in the family, it's like, oh, they take all the attention, they suck all the air and everything, and everyone else is left, kind of in the dust. And I felt like that for a long time. Like, it's Chris, it's about Chris again. And now I get to kind of separate, the addicted Chris with this brother that I love. And that is just what I needed. I needed that. I wanted that. Like, I'd separate those two. Like, and I don't, it was unfair to continue on with this legacy of both. Yeah, I love Chris, but he was, sometimes with real, pain and, trouble, and I don't need both. I can see Chris as, his struggles, but I can see just all the good stuff he did too, so.
In finding that, what doors has that really opened up for you in your personal growth? And you said recovery's been fairly recent for you.
Yeah.
When did you find that for yourself, and how has that recovery changed the direction of your life?
Well, it's funny. Like, I at some point, I said to myself, especially when I started going out, having this event in my life and going out and talking to in schools and communities, mostly about prevention. I'm like, I probably shouldn't be drinking either, because that's causing problems in my life. So I would stop. I had time periods in my life where 4 or 5 years of sobriety, that I thought it was all about just giving. I thought this was the hardest thing I've ever done. I gave up drinking, and yet I was still causing all sorts of train wrecks, as I like to call them, in my life, and I didn't see why that was happening, because I'm not drinking, and not only that, but I couldn't sustain it either. I would get 5 years and say, well, it's St. Patrick's Day, I can have one Guinness. I got this, and I would have that one Guinness, and then it was two, and then I was right back where I was before, and I never could figure that out. And so, I would go into meetings during that time, and it was just like at home with Chris. With Chris, we could always point to him and say, the rest of us could say, well, we're not that bad, so I guess we're okay. We weren't okay. So I would go into meetings and say, listen to people share and say, oh, that person drinks more than me. I don't belong here yet. I'm okay. Mm-hmm. And that's what, and then it was about 7 years ago, I got tired of this. I was getting older. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, now I'm really trying to overmanage, like, when should I leave this party to get home safely? And, what route do I take home to avoid that? Like, this is nuts. So I stopped again. And I happened to, have a conversation with a woman who I used to, go in, and she has a clinic down in Madison. And I used to help her out with her teen IOPs, talking about, improv and connection. And she called me up one day. She said, how you doing? And I'm like, I haven't had a drink in 4 months, expecting a lot more applause than I got. And she's like, that's great. Well, she goes, well, let's connect and have a coffee. And I'm like, great, let's do that. She goes, meet me, Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the basement of the Presbyterian Church. I'm like, here we go again. I knew where this was going. And I'm like, but it was this person that asked me, like, that had helped so many people in Dane County. I'm like, how do you say no to that? So it was my first real experience of, like, surrendering to a higher power. It was my friend Shelley. And I'm like, all right, I'll go. And I started to not think like that person drinks more than me. I was like, wow, I've had broken relationships like that person. I've had job loss like that person. I'm like, this isn't about drinking. I just need to be sober to do all this stuff, which just blew me away. I wasn't, and another thing I realized was that we started talking about things like rigorous honesty and gratitude and humility. I'm like, I didn't know any of those things. I was a marketing guy and I was an Irishman. So rigorous honesty, I'm like, nah, it's the gray area. Like we got to, massage the story and curate this. And I realized that this person I was putting out to the world wasn't an authentic person. In fact, to be that person, I needed everyone around me to do certain things. I needed my wife and family to act a certain way. I needed my employers to give me that job, not the one I have, that one. You don't understand, because I got to be this person. And as likable as I am, I was pushing people away because nobody wants to be controlled like that. And all of a sudden, I realized, it's, to be rigorously honest, and I had to be my authentic self. And that person I was putting out could never be honest or grateful or humble because it wasn't a real person. How could that person ever be those things? And I think that a lot of people are walking around that way, like we're not our fully authentic self, so we're not. Yeah. So it's still a process, but man, what a great thing it is because it produces a feeling like, for instance, like the whole rigorously honest thing is like, if you ask me if I'm an honest person, I would say absolutely I am. But when somebody asks you, when you come home with how many drinks did you have? Like, just a couple. The rigorously honest answer would have been 10, 12. But so when you answer that way, it's like, yes, I'm being honest. I admitted I was drinking, but I wasn't fully honest. Mm-hmm. And you carry that. You don't know it, but, you at some point that guilt and shame, it's there. You can bury it as deep as you want, but it's always going to be there. And I didn't really realize that that's what that was, Mm-hmm. I'd be grateful for the easy things, like, I'm grateful for my kids, or I'm grateful I get to live in Wisconsin. It's a beautiful place. But it's not true gratitude, like when you see the littlest things that you're like, that were passing you by every other time of your life, and you're like, you missed it. But now you see it, and you're like, wow. I got, that, I'm grateful for that.
Because you get out of the fog.
It changes you, yeah. Your mood, it has an immediate effect.
It does.
You're finding gratitude in the little things many times during the day, like, wow, all of a sudden you got through a day, like, in this sense of, like, gratitude rather than the fog, yeah.
It's so ingrained in our culture here, and it makes it really tough. Because if you say to someone, oh, I don't drink, they're usually, I don't know about you, but the response is, oh, why?
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with you? Or you're somehow different. I do find that the culture is beginning to shift, that people aren't asking that so much anymore, and they're recognizing that people are making different choices, because now you have the Surgeon General come out and do the whole warning about how toxic alcohol is. for example. So it's that shift is happening, and more people are openly talking about how they've used alcohol as a solution. It is a solution.
Oh, absolutely. It's how we.
It might wreck your life while you're doing it,
It's how you
but it's a
manage your
solution.
emotions. Emotions are tough.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
a lot of times I didn't really want to, have those kind of emotions, or I didn't feel comfortable in those emotions. So I knew how to manage it. Yeah, I drank. It's interesting you mentioned the Surgeon General, and that there was also another report that came out 2 years ago after COVID that he called the epidemic of loneliness, which it's probably my favorite Surgeon General report. I'm kidding, it's the only one I've heard of. And I skimmed it at best, but it was pretty good, the Surgeon General report, shut up, Farley. But it was good because it talked about this need for connection and to be this whole person. And I think, the combination of those two, people, turn to alcohol because they're so isolated and so lonely.
Absolutely.
And I think not only is it toxic and bad, but we're also lonely and isolated. So,
Absolutely.
Eliminating one and really focusing on the connection and think on the other side, wow, imagine what that would produce.
For many years, I used to say I was a social drinker. I didn't understand the concept of drinking alone. And I've gone through 2 divorces in my life. The second divorce, I used alcohol as a solution, didn't want to feel those feelings, got done with work, would drink, come home and drink, because I just didn't want to feel that feeling. That was my escape. And I realized I'm drinking alone. I'm doing something I said I was never going, that I didn't understand why people did that. But I was using it as a solution at that time in my life because the pain was so deep at that time, and I just didn't want to feel it. I needed to still, what I thought, the lie that I told myself, is I thought I still needed, that the alcohol would help me continue on. And eventually you're in an alcohol fog. And if you haven't been there, only people that have had that experience will understand. You kind of just live in this fog of, till you can drink again. And you're thinking about I would think about having the drink before I even left the office. I was already starting to think about having that drink. And it got a hold of me.
Yeah. I think there's less stigma about drinking or over drinking than there is about a failed marriage. The stigma and shame about that is like that I don't want. I can handle all the drinking is there's shame and guilt there, but it's acceptable. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I just got one divorce and that's enough for me. But I remember thinking but this is my identity. This is so I drank. That was really tough. But it's interesting. I realized this about me too, and this is, we'll talk about this maybe if we want to, our use of humor as a coping mechanism, but this whole loneliness and not being your authentic self. I realized that, and I know this was true for Chris. We could be in the middle of a room, usually a bar, or in the middle of a bar, surrounded by people, center of attention, making everyone laugh, and yet not feeling more like we're standing on the surface of the moon. Outwardly, oh, you've got this whole, everyone's laughing at you, and you're but this isn't me. And the only way to deal with that was to drink and, that drink that feeling away. Because they weren't seeing me, they wanted me just to perform and make everyone laugh, and yet I'm but that's not me, and that's a lonely place, and it looks like you've got all the friends in the world and you're connecting, but you're not, It's just like, actually, it's the worst place to be like in the center of the public eye and feeling completely alone. That's a strange feeling, but I know Chris felt it. I got a tinge of it myself.
So you were out in New York City when Chris was filming Saturday Night Live,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly in the book. And so you were there when he was growing this fame that was happening. How did your family, how was your family? How did you guys grasp his fame when he was coming up at that time? Were you all just really proud of him?
Yes.
Or did you see both the good and the bad of it, or what did that look like as a
funny.
family?
It didn't change us at all, because a lot of the stuff Chris did on SNL, he's doing that Chippendales thing. Like, I remember him doing that in the KK, and
That's
it's
one
like
of my
nothing
favorite
new.
skits.
Yeah, it's nothing new. The Chris Farley show character, like with Paul McCartney. Remember when you were the Beatles? I'm like, oh my God, I used to call him Mr. Question, because he wouldn't let. We shared a bedroom. Wouldn't let me go to bed at night. Remember, because he was afraid to of the dark. I don't know. Remember that scary movie we watched 5 minutes ago? Yeah, I remember it. Like that. That was scary. He would ask me would you go to bed? And then I see him doing it with Paul McCartney and getting paid for it. It was crazy. So it really wasn't that we saw Chris in a different eye, that's just Chris, being funny. But it was, so it really didn't change us, we didn't become we just all had our lives, and,
proud of what he was accomplishing,
really proud of it,
and
but
what he was doing.
Me being out there in New York with him, it was my first kind of understanding of being what a first responder was like, because the rest of the family was in Wisconsin, and I saw this guy struggling, and I didn't know how to help him. I thought I had to come up with a solution, and so watching him kind of struggle, possibly losing this amazing job that he had, a dream job. It was all, it was all right there in front of me. And he would go to rehab and then come back into the same environment, do the same thing, and before long, right back where he was. And because he went into treatment for the wrong reasons, to please people or not to lose this great job. But the most wonderful time was when he came out of Hazleton the second time, and he did something different. Instead of going to his big apartment on the Upper West Side, he went to sober living facility on the Lower East Side, on TV every Saturday night, but working his recovery program every day, making his bed every morning, and just doing the stuff. And I didn't know what I was seeing, but what we all saw was, this career that shot through the roof. Mm-hmm. That was Chris in recovery. And it was because, he went from treatment to sober living and work and going to meetings, and, that I didn't know what that was. I just saw that he was dressing better. I saw that was the only.
So when he shot through to success, he was sober.
The last 3 years on SNL, when he was really just, on fire.
Yeah.
He was in recovery. He was amazing, and because he not only that, but it's something I talk about a lot. It was his Second City experience is he always has ensemble. He always had these people around him, even in high school, which drove me nuts. Like, I tried so hard to make friends, and this idiot, effortlessly would make friends because he had people around him that accepted him and trusted him. His ensemble was it was amazing to see, and it really clicked in those last years. And I remember when I wrote my book, I interviewed David Spade and Adam Sandler and Chris Rock, and all of them said, like, yeah, he was funnier than all of us.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, definitely Spade, but like Sandler and Rock, really?
Yeah,
It was
Adam
incredible.
Sandler said he was the funniest person he's ever known.
Yeah, because and he was also he was just just about funny. Friends say that too, because he just loved, like, when you try to make a joke, and he would laugh so hard authentically because he valued humor so much. And like, you're trying to make a joke. I love that. Like, it was the dumbest thing I ever heard, but I loved it. Like, he genuinely loved the fact that you tried to make him laugh. And so, yeah, he was that way. He was at his best in an ensemble. Unfortunately, when he went to L.A. and made movies, it became a commodity, where other people were making money when he was making money. He lost that ensemble. And I think he felt that, and he didn't know where to go with it. And, the ending's the ending. Yeah.
Success can be tricky.
Yeah.
It really can be. I've never had that kind of success, but just coming up, in my personal growth and my professional growth in my career, I've had times where I've outgrown people around me.
Yeah.
And where I'm going in my life might be different than someone else. And then also going through divorce, that upsets all of your friend group, going through those things. And sometimes you really do look around at times and, you're having your own identity crisis. So I can relate to that to a certain level, that not ever, as you go through and life changes, so do the people around you change.
Yeah.
And not everyone can be accepting of change.
No, and it's interesting. Like, the thing with Chris was, his humor always kind of took center stage, and that's people identified him with his humor. But like me in recovery, like when somebody comes up to me and like, man, you seem happier, or like, what is it with you? And it's just me being comfortable with who I am. I don't know if Chris got enough of that. It was like, yeah, just be funny. And I don't think when somebody comes up to me and notices that in me, like that change, like that I can't even explain, it has an amazing effect on how I feel and how connected I feel. And it saddens me to think that Chris didn't get enough of that, because I saw a change, but I don't know, even as a brother, I probably could have acknowledged that a little bit more, because I see it, but I think we need to acknowledge that in others, like, because we don't believe it. We were so attached to this identity of who we were.
Maturity and growth.
Yeah.
Look how many years it's taken. I'm in my 50s. I know how many years it's taken for me to just realize and don't care. And I'm going to live my best life. And this is who I need to be. And the freedom of not caring what other people think. My story is my story. I can't change it. This is who I am. The good, the bad, the ugly. All I can do now is take what I've done with my life and try to help and do and impact others. And I think we're both on that mission to help and impact others.
Well, and I even said, like, somebody asked me on a podcast once, are you a better parent than your parents were to you? I'm like, that's a horrible question. Why would you ask me that? I wanted to be. Does that count? I did, but I was just given the playbook that my dad gave me, that his dad and so I was this teasing dad. I used humor to ease people's pain, and so I remember I tell the story when middle daughter came when she was very little. She said, "Dad, I'm afraid of the dark," and my response was, Frankly, I would be too if I had that under my bed. Funny stuff. Did not help her with her trauma. But I answer that question like, so that's how it was. But even though my kids are in my 30s, I still have that opportunity to be that better parent, and I still get to do that. And and I have to acknowledge, make amends for some of these past things,
Sure.
which recovery gives me that tool to do. But I also get to always be that person that wanted me to be, that I thought I should be. And there's always that opportunity in which I love that story. I can still contribute to that as just with that relationship with my kids. It's not over just because they're adults now. I still get to be the parent that I always wanted to be way back then, but,
Mm-hmm. So the Farley name and that Farley legacy, what do you want people to say when you're not here anymore? When you've done your time? We all have that, unfortunately. What do you want people to remember the most? I'd like to
acknowledge that, actually, he was funnier than Chris. That'll never happen. I'm sorry. That's just not going to happen. I think the legacy is this somebody that really, we wanted to there's somebody that really was comfortable with who they were, and wanted to connect with people, like, with who, authentic person to authentic person. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm in the recovery space now to do just that, to use my recovery story. What's really fun is I go and I do these keynote speeches, and people say, "Oh, Chris Farley's brother is going to talk about recovery or humor and therapy or whatever it is," and the one or two people that come up to me afterwards, I love it when they look at me and they go, "That's not what I expected at all." Like, that you thought I was going to be. You thought I was going to be funny. Sorry. But you thought I was going to talk about Chris or this. Like, everyone loves, even like the people that in recovery that talk about this, the drama that caused them to get in. We're drawn to that story. But when I talk about my life in recovery, all of a sudden, and some of the struggles, it's great that people think they're going to hear about the Farleys, and all of a sudden they're like, "Wow, that sounds like that's my story." I hear my story in his, and so it's really like, I'm no different than you. As a matter of fact, I think that we have something more than anyone else in the fact that I'm not different because I'm a Farley. We're different because we've got this Wisconsin DNA. I talk about it all the time because I firmly believe, like, imagine like if the Farleys grew up in like Minnesota or Iowa, I don't think it would be as neat, half as cool. There's just the combo, like, really, I just think, I think what you're seeing is this, comfort level that we have of who we are in Wisconsin, and I think the more we as Farley's, more I show that comfort level, like, this is my authentic self, and it's okay. I don't have to be anything else. This is it. That's awesome. It's really, I need other people to be that authentic, to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, as I like to say, because it's a crazy world. So how do we do it differently?
I think you're doing an amazing job keeping Chris's legacy alive and using that platform to show who you are and what you're doing in recovery. And I think Chris would be really proud of the work that you're doing.
I hope so. I'm continuing, his work. I'm being that person I think he always wanted me to be,
For sure.
I always thought he was just pushing my buttons. Here I was, all this life, especially out in New York, I was this person playing this caricature of myself, and, who I thought I needed to be. And here's Chris, who's known for his characters, but he was just being himself. And I think his message to me all those years was like, Tommy, just be yourself. And just just people will come to you. And the first step in that was moving back here with my family to Wisconsin. But I get that, and I love and really, it's funny. Like I resisted from the start. There was this. They wanted to make Chris this poster boy of overdose awareness, and I'm like, I'm not going to define him by his last moments of his life. We should care about the people we're losing because of who they were. Like this, we don't have their laughter or their joy or their all the other stuff. Don't define them by this and make drugs a bad person. Like drugs are bad. Yeah, I get it. But if you focus on that, you lose all these people, I think.
Right.
Focus on what he did in recovery
and
what he was doing in recovery.
I love talking about that. It was amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have appreciated this conversation, and I appreciate you opening up to us with some real raw honesty.
Yeah, it's funny. Because this was healing for me. I know this podcast is going to help a lot of people healing, but I'm modeling it for you because this is me healing. I talk about it, and that's what we need to do. So thank you for just having this, forum to be able to do that.
So we talked about it today. We said we were going to talk about it, and we did. Where do people find? It's recovery.com.
Yeah. It's a tech company. Tom Farley working for a tech company is almost as funny as my early career. Tom Farley working in finance. Everyone needs a little comic relief, I suppose. Every industry. So.
And if you're also looking for a speaker, a keynote speaker, you do that work too. And I know that. Can they connect with you on recovery.com, or do you have a...
Yeah, so, you find me on, LinkedIn, which is, LinkedIn Thomas Farley. I don't know what it is. Instagram, which is the
Reach
Tom
out
Farley.
to us. We'll connect you with Tom
But
Farley.
recovery.com, it's this really neat startup, connecting people to the right treatment facilities. And it's a startup in Wisconsin. I talk about it all the time. This is a website, a tech company that could exist out in Silicon Valley or Cambridge, Mass, or any other tech hub. But the fact that it's here in Madison, it's doing this great work, but doing it the way with our kind of heart and soul into it. And it's one of the top 200 fastest growing companies in America last year. And they're really, it's not just treatment, it's all recovery. It's like finding, the right sober living, the right, outpatient, the right, any, mental health resources.
And there's a lot of challenges. We work with people and for sure. So I'm looking forward to checking it out. And well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Wow, this has been wonderful. So, thank you so much.
Yes.
This was great. What a great conversation.
Thanks.
You can find the We're Talking About It podcast on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.